Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Midway Business Podcast, where we dive into conversations with real business leaders about what truly drives success. I'm James DeMambro, co-host filling in for Butch Zemar while he is out. And today we have
Special
his
guest.
name is Forrest Durr with Durr Consulting. He's the owner. With his business, he helps business owners who are overwhelmed, unclear, and help them find their growth. The industries that he has worked in, he has helped tech, telecom, construction, and service industry. He knows a lot, and what he helps is generate momentum. So I'm excited to dive a little deeper. Welcome to the show, Mr. Durr. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for the invite. Appreciate it.
If you don't mind, can you just give a snapshot of what you do specifically on a day-to-day basis and how you help businesses?
Yeah. So, what happened is over the last 28 years, I've found myself naturally in the second in command seat, whether that's COO or president to the CEO of various companies and helping them scale and grow founder led businesses. And it seems to be that was my sweet spot. So, a little over a year ago, I decided to branch out on my own and work with multiple companies at a time. And so, I tell people I help founders' phones stop ringing so their bank account can start singing. And what that really means is to get those founders so they're not answering every question in the business to basically just make all the decisions. So building accountability and structure to where that business can actually scale rather than sitting stagnant waiting on the owner to make a decision.
Yeah. And with that time that you've helped businesses, what have you seen being the biggest challenge? And it sounds like wearing a lot of hats, which, I think you can relate, and as well as I have as being a business owner. It seems to be the most challenging thing every day. But what do you see, helping these types of businesses every day?
Yeah, it's definitely wearing a lot of hats, but it's also not giving up hats that they need to give up. So founders who've started their businesses, you and I were talking about that earlier, you end up doing everything in the business for a period of time. You're doing finance, sales, operations, delivery, marketing. And as the founder scales their business, they have to let go of things and delegate those things so that they can focus on working on the business instead of in the business. And so typically what I'll see is go through a process to talk to that founder and find out what are the things that they're doing on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. And as we go through that list, we ideally uncover numerous things that are worth well below what they're paying themselves. And part of the structure is to just have a conversation and say, is it worth the rate that you're getting paid per hour? Let's just do the math on what your compensation is
Yeah.
for you to go to the bank every day. Well, no, it's not. Let's get a check deposit machine and let your admin deposit the checks. Just all those different things that founders just do by nature, where they're the ones that turn the lights on when the office opens and they're the ones that turn the lights off when it leaves. Get them structured to where they're liberated from that.
I love that. It's interesting to know that you have those conversations about getting paid per hour, doing the minuscule types of things every day.
Yeah.
I've always thought they were money making activities versus, trying to deploy certain activities. But it sounds like a control challenge, wouldn't you say?
There's definitely some control. There's call it letting go of the vine, letting go of somebody else to do those things. That's part of the process that we walk through is figuring out what's the most important things that founder needs to work on, and what are the things that are distracting them from scaling their business faster or growing their business. And now let's figure out how to get rid of those things. Get rid of those things, meaning delegate those to somebody. Look at the team that you have, figure out how to pass those things off. I find that founders, the pushback I get is, well, nobody can do it as good as me. And my response to that is, okay, can somebody do it good enough? Like, can they do it good enough to deposit the check? Or can they do it good enough to do whatever that process is that you're hanging on to? If they can do it good enough, you need to get rid of it. Do you need to maintain the large relationships with your key clients? Probably. That's probably something you need to stay focused on. But those B and C clients, let other people manage those clients for you.
Yeah, it sounds like a very psychological challenge day in and day out, knowing that and trying to sit back. I hear the message, but what do you feel is, I would assume a lot of business owners are trying to tell them that themselves, either out of habit, they continue to fall back on
Yeah.
being the person doing it. But how do you break, I guess, the paradigm so they can really listen to you and understand, can they do it good enough.
I like going back into dollars and cents and, I'll literally get in a room and let's put on the dry erase board. All right, what is your salary that you're taking home, Mr. Founder? All right, what's your draw that you're taking home? How about that vehicle expense? How about that health insurance policy? Literally getting to the nuts and bolts and figuring it out. Guess what? You're paying yourself, let's say $200 an hour. Is it worth $200 an hour for you to go to the bank? Is it worth $200 an hour for you to take the call from that customer that's a C-level customer? Not that that's not a bad customer, but it's not worth your time. And
Yeah.
I've used this illustration. I say at the end of the day, you're stealing from the company. You're stealing from yourself when you're doing things that are less value because there's an opportunity cost where you could be doing so much more. I had one that was literally changing the oil in his trucks. It's a
Wow.
HVAC company.
Yeah.
And after spending some time, I'm like, "Well, what are you doing changing the oil in your trucks?" And he said, "Well, I just do it on the weekends." I'm like, "I would rather you, A, go golfing on the weekends, or B, be thinking about the business where it's something else, not changing the oil." I mean, take that to the oil change place. That is
Yeah.
no reason for you to be doing that. But it takes an outsider a lot of times to just help them identify where they're lacking and where they're, quote, "stealing from the company."
Oh, I love that. I think those are great psychological messages too, so they can wake up every day and really see that. I
Yeah.
know that AI is, such a buzzword these days. And I would assume that you're trying to help these business owners also understand, the benefits of what they can do to actually deploy some of this, tasks, these mundane tasks. Any suggestions of the AI that you've seen that could help business owners in that regard?
Yeah, I'm a big blocking and tackling guy, so I like looking at practical things that, a lot of people chase this super sexy thing for AI and
Yeah.
try to deploy something that, you can post on LinkedIn about how cool it is. And I'm more of the practical guy. Let's figure out what are the practical things we can do with AI. Like, for example, I've got a company that I work with. It's a landscaping company, and
Mhm.
there is something called 100 days of hell in landscaping, at least in the South, where there's 100 days where you
Right.
cannot answer the phone fast enough because everybody wants their yard done, everybody's late,
Yeah.
everybody wants a tree knocked down, whatever. And there's just you can't hire enough people to answer the phone. So let's deploy an AI solution that goes through and answers basic questions, answers questions about their bills, go ahead and scheduling site visits and things like that, and offload some of those tasks that you can't scale fast enough up and down
Right.
in the reality. So I go back to practical tools. What are the practical ways you can AI?
Yeah. So with that said, do you feel that these types of businesses you're helping are receptive to AI? Are they starting to embrace it and see the benefits?
Yeah, I'd say a lot of them are initially hesitant, but over
Mm.
time, as you start working through what the reality is and what the cause and effect is, they start to let go of things. So it's like anything new adoption, it takes time. I worked through the dot-com boom and people weren't even interested in ordering pizzas online through a website. And, now we
Yeah.
do it through an app. So it just takes time to adopt it and get comfortable with it.
Yeah, so yeah, it does seem to make sense, just human nature of change, but it's also, I would assume, trying it out. If it's
Mhm.
working, keep running with it. If it's not, get rid of it, right? Try a
Yeah.
different AI tool or different tool that might be practical. But it's interesting because you're definitely in a line of business that has to do with, psychological challenges.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about what led you to start your own business helping owners in this regard?
Well, I worked for an office furniture company for 18 years where I was the second in command. I had the second in command role, but not the second in command title or authority.
Huh.
And when I left that company, I went to work for a company that was about 10 years old, but it was still in startup mode. It was only seven
Yeah.
employees and went through the process over about 8 years to build and scale that company and multiply it several times. And through that process, I realized how much I like the building systems, building structure, and building freedom for that founder. The founders that I first started working with, they're working 60, 70, 80 hours. And the second to last one I worked for, No, he was working 20 hours a week by the time I left, and we had built everything out to where he could take a month off, and, I just realized that that was my niche.
Yeah.
I call myself a reluctant entrepreneur. I'm not gonna go out and mortgage my house and buy 20 trucks and buy a building and set up some type of business, but I would be more comfortable helping another founder scale their business, and so I was able to, help a landscaping company scale their business to where they were able to exit, and so it just really made sense to me that that's where my sweet spot is, to just help founders get out of the way and help them scale their business with less friction.
Yeah, I love the fact that you focus on structure because, as much as there's a lot of people, we'll call it left brain, right brain out there, probably don't even know which side of the, spectrum they're on. Structure is always so important because if you don't have it, every day could be chaos. So it sounds like you're sitting down with them and really like learning their business from, like you were mentioning, all the different facets. But do you find a lot of business owners that really don't know how to answer the question, are they trying to sell the company or work in it
Yeah.
forever? Like their mission is, this is my business. I'm staying here until I die.
Yeah,
Or,
it's so funny you asked that because I was talking to a company earlier today, a franchise owner, him and his wife, and we were sitting in a coffee shop. And my first question out of the gate, nice to meet you, shake hands, whatever. I said, "So what's your exit strategy?" And they were like, "Wait, hold on, what do you mean exit strategy?" I was like, "No, no,
yeah,
no. This will be the foundation of our discussion, and you may not have thought of this, but what is your exit strategy?" If you don't know what that is, then you can't make decisions that will help you get there. And so we
yeah,
went back and forth and had a discussion, and we don't have the exit strategy clearly defined other than they want to sell the business. Great. Now let's talk about timing. If you want to sell in 10 years and you want a 5x multiple on EBITDA, what does the EBITDA need to be? How much money do you want? Now let's back into it and project manage the decisions because so many people are just flying by the seat of their pants. And
yeah,
even, I'm sure you see this too, even businesses that are 8, 10, 15 million have no plan. They've been successful by brute force in spite of themselves, but
yeah.
stepping back and going, "What is my exit strategy?" That will frame the lens that you need to make decisions.
Yeah, it's like, it's almost like setting a goal, but it's not a goal that they've ever thought about. And something that I have seen as well is, it's similar, but like what's the why
Yeah,
behind what you do, the core
yeah,
purpose, and I'm gonna flip that to you. Can you tell the listeners your core purpose?
yeah,
It sounds great, like to know the word structure, build structure and follow it, but what it drives you every day when
yeah,
you wake up? The deeper reason why you were doing
yeah.
what you do.
If you asked me a year ago when I first got started, I would say that my purpose was to help business owners. But I've really shifted that to be more clearly defined. And
Yeah.
my focus now is to help founders get unshackled from their business. I
Love
find
that.
it over and over again that, I'll ask a founder, when's the last time you took a vacation? I don't know, 3 years ago. Can you take a week off without your business imploding? No, no way I can
Yeah.
do that. Well, guess what? I hate to tell you, you have a job. You don't have a business. And I have to hold the mirror up and say, you have a W-2 position at this point. You don't have an operating functioning business. You can't even sell this thing. If it
Yeah.
can't survive without a week, you can't sell it. So getting those founders unshackled from the business that they created, where they started it probably because they wanted freedom, and yet they ended up shackled to a business.
Yeah. You know what? I think that is just a wonderful why behind being in marketing. I really felt the feeling behind that because
Yeah,
that's what people buy. And that's a big advice to anybody that is listening that is being challenged is you need to find core purpose of the emotion of
yeah,
what you're doing every day. And just to say, I put the square peg in the square hole doesn't really get anybody that's listening. So,
mhm,
I compliment you on changing it, by the way, because that is
thank
a
you.
really good sound why behind it. And, also I've seen a lot of businesses that, I've heard this phrase in the past that money doesn't sleep, money doesn't
Mhm,
go on vacation. So business owners end up feeling that and being stuck. So,
mhm,
like, if they are on vacation, they're still looking at their phone, still looking at the computer,
yeah,
still, tapped in. I always have a funny phrase that somebody a long time ago, I'd like to meet this person that was laying on the couch one day on a Sunday and reached out to their boss, and the boss responded and it ruined it for everybody. Now we're always constantly tagged on our phone.
Yeah.
But I mean, to find the purpose as well as to understand being shackled, I think is a huge thing that
Mm.
do you see psychologically they start to feel getting to that place you're trying to take them?
Yeah. Yeah, it just really resonates with them, and, that unshackling, they thought they were free, and when you ask, some really, direct questions about, "Can you take a month off and your business not implode?" And they go, "Well, no, I can't do that."
Yeah.
Well, then again, you are shackled to this business. If you gotta try to go sell your business, let's say you wanna sell it in 10 years, and the PE company or whoever asks you, "Who's the most successful salesperson?" And you say you, and who holds the business together? And if you say you, guess what? They don't want to buy your business because
Right.
they don't want to buy you. They want to buy the systems and structure. And I relate it to three things: people, process, and structure. If you get the right people, get the processes defined, and get the structure of the business in place, you have a business. If you don't, you're missing one or multiple pieces of those three items: people, process, or structure.
I love that. Being in marketing, I've always talked to people that were trying to find that sexy brand,
Mm.
and they always wanted to go higher than really what was happening behind the doors.
Yeah.
And I always thought that was obviously contradictory, but a lie.
Hmm.
You're ultimately selling a lie. And, I mean, you look at the largest brands out there, like for example, Apple. I've heard for many years, I want to look like Apple. But you're not Apple. You're
Yeah.
not
Right.
structured like Apple.
Right.
Your people aren't like Apple, and the process is not like Apple.
Yeah.
When it comes to those types of, we'll call them pillars that you help companies with, I'm sure time is the essence, and those types of things need to be massaged. But one of the things I've learned about you is you're very hands on. So,
Mhm.
can you tell us a little bit more how you dive
Yeah.
deeper into those pillars, and usually what is the timing around them to kind of accomplish, at least get to a better place of having to feel good as an owner and being able to not feel like you work in the
Mhm.
company and you're
Right.
running the company.
Yeah. Well, keep in mind, I've only been doing this for 13 months now officially, but what I have come up with is that not every business is uh, in the same spot. So I got to
Yeah.
figure out where they are to figure out where to start. I can tell you, I used AI and built a Chat GPT program that said, "Give me a 12-month program." 1 day a week to help
Yeah.
a client get unshackled from their business. And it looked great on paper. And I even handed it out with my first 3 contracts, and then after about 3 weeks, I was like, "Well, this isn't any good because
Right.
this company's here, they're all in 3 different places." So, it's really about taking the first couple of weeks to just assess where they are. Do they have a clear vision? Does everybody understand core roles and responsibilities? Do they have processes in any way, shape, or form? Even if they're not good process, do they have some type of processes documented?
Hmm.
And then just working with them to hit milestones that show momentum. We talked about that earlier. You've got to be able to show momentum in making and affecting change. And so I'll look for low hanging fruit that may not create a lot of dollar value, but will create the sense of a team moving forward and making progress. And so maybe it's just starting with creating a documented clear vision that everybody understands and documenting some core processes that everybody can follow. So
So
just baby steps.
right, right. It sounds like you're chipping away at it, but hence, one, I think, point of difference that you offer, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's that hands-on, mentality and ready to roll your sleeves up and be a part of the crew.
Yeah. Yep.
I love that. Something that I've seen a lot of companies, even startups, really preach is, they get stuck on their product or service. And I understand, right? Because it's something they're passionate about. But at the end of the day, being an outsider when they're pitching it to investors or just trying to scale it to eventually pitch to investors, what can you tell them that is critical of what investors are looking for
Yeah.
if they were wanting to sell it?
Yeah. Well, one of the first things is having a clearly defined product. A lot of these visionaries and founders, they're chasing squirrels left, right, and sideways. And so when
Mhm.
you sit down and say, "What is your product offering?" They have 20 different things, 20 different variations that will not scale when you get to that level. So let's tone this down. Let's get this concise. Let's break it down and have 3 consumable products. Not that everybody's going to fall in that bucket, but all of our sales and marketing efforts should fall into that bucket so that we're spending our resources identifying those products, but then also identifying the ideal client. I worked with a company where they were just taking any kind of business they could, and it was just
Mhm.
whatever came along. And that's fine when you're in startup mode, but once you've got an established business, you really got to build that structure to say, these are our ideal clients. And while we might take some other business, we're not going to take this level of business. And you may have to fire some customers. So when companies, PE companies, or another buyer or somebody's looking to consolidate is going to come in, they're going to want to look and make sure there's clearly defined products as well as a clearly defined market that can be addressed and that can be expanded.
Love that. So it's just to clarify the simplicity. I think a lot of people out there that are running businesses, you're just throwing spaghetti noodles at the
Yep.
wall and seeing what's going to stick and start to lose themselves in their own company and like you say, get shackled. And as a marketer, you can't make it simple enough, I think,
Right.
these days because we are so bombarded with, threads from social media, and
Yep.
then on top of it, you're getting hit left and right with all these messages. You can't even remember, I guess what you did 2 hours ago, that's at least me.
Yeah.
But at
I
the
think that's
same
everybody.
time, yeah, at the same time, you show up for work and you're just like, okay, let's do this today. People see that on the outside. It sounds
Mhm.
like is what you're saying, and you start to lose your simplicity. But I also like what you said about fishing in the small ponds.
Mhm.
I think there is something to be said about being a business owner and having a very prideful ego. And it's back to the psychological part. You feel strong and confident. You want to go sell it to everybody in the world, but no one's really hearing it because the message might not really resonate with, whatever type of person you're talking to that you shouldn't be talking to. So like it becomes that type of scenario. With
Yeah.
that said, what do you feel is your biggest point of difference? Because it sounds like that's really what this is feeding into is, hey, your message needs to be clear.
Mhm.
And that is a great opportunity to mention and promote your point of difference. What do you want the listeners to know about your big point of difference?
Yeah, I think my big point of difference is working with founders and meeting them where they are, figuring out where they want to go. There's a lot of, I would say, consultants, fractional COOs, whatever you want to call us, that are out there that have a program and then they try to push their program and push clients into the box of their program. Whereas I want to figure out where somebody is, where they're wanting to go, and then pull the levers that need to be pulled. Now, they may not need help. Actually, a lot of them don't need help with sales. It's been
Oh,
interesting.
wow.
Most of my clients don't have sales problems. They have structure problems. They have operational problems. They have delivery problems. Talking about the service delivery business, the construction business, the telecom and tech, they just have not had a lot of sales issues. And it's really more about how to build the infrastructure to deliver the service. And so, in a summary, I would say I meet founders where they are, where they're at, and help them get where they want to go. And that may be 6 months, it might be 9 months, it might be 12 months. It really just depends on what the engagement they need.
Very interesting because I would have thought that sales was the magic word, especially from an investor's ear. But do you also see that with investors when a company is asking you to help them and really where you're taking them and helping them being hands on? That's also being said by investors like, hey, you guys are making good money, but when you get the job, it all falls through, right?
Right.
It's like watch what you wish for, right? Type of thing.
Exactly. It's the dog chasing the car and then he catches the car and now what he does, right? No, but I don't see the clients again, the clients I've been working with have not had sales problems. They've had
Hmm.
delivery problems. But when you have delivery problems, that creates sales problems. Like you just said, if you can't deliver on the product, you're not going to sell more. So I've found that if I focus on the operations and delivery side, the structure of the business, making sure we have the right people in the right seats, if you have a sales engine, that sales engine now can go significantly faster and farther. Sometimes it's not the issue is not the issue. I tell people, in having conversations, it's not really that you didn't take the trash out, it's that you didn't do the dishes when you're arguing with your wife the night before. It's
Yeah.
the trash is just the catalyst that reached the tipping point, and the dishes is really what the problem was. So let's go back and find what the real issue is. The real issue a lot of times is service delivery. You fix that, and then the sales becomes a natural process that happens and goes even faster. You might have to make some adjustments, but again, you go back to target market and clearly defined products. If you've got a salesperson that has 100 products, 100 different widgets they're trying to sell, it's
Yeah.
100 different target markets.
Yeah, it's and I always felt it was a slow sell and not, give them everything it's like showing up for a Thanksgiving Day feast
Yeah.
and it's literally a feast and you're like,
Yeah.
I don't even know where to start with all
Yeah.
this food.
Yeah.
Go in with the turkey. Just start
Right.
with the turkey, right? But it
Yeah.
sounds like a clear lens is what you provide. I would think a lot of founders and especially startup companies get stuck showing up and dealing with the headaches all day. But
Firefighting.
yeah, it's the simplicity of just listening with their heart saying, of really where's the headache coming from?
Yeah.
You know, sales are doing fine and
Yeah.
it's, more of operations. What would you say some of the biggest mistakes you're seeing in the economy for these types of businesses that you help or hoping to help? What are you seeing a lot of commonalities with mistakes and challenges?
A lot of it is real simple stuff like just tracking expenses and making sure that you've got processes and procedures in place to control expenses. As these companies grow, and again, I'm dealing with founder-led companies, so that, they may have 10 employees, they might have 100, but as they've scaled, they just keep handing out credit cards to people, and trusting that they're, doing right by the company, or they keep giving out, company vehicles or whatever, and so just getting systems and structure in place to help you scale, founders forget that. What worked a year ago or even 2 years ago will not work today now that you've reached this inflection point. What got you to $1,000,000 is not gonna get you to $10,000,000, and so that's the things that I just keep seeing, and it's really just good business, and unfortunately, a lot of these founders were really good at their craft, but have never learned business, and so they've just been going it alone and doing the best they can. They are the best
Mm.
AC tech or the best electrician or whatever it is, but they've never had the fundamental business training or somebody to help them with just fundamental, here's how you review a P&L. Here's how you should manage your expenses. Here's how you should control expenses. So a lot of that stuff, again, if you clean up the back of the house, the front of the house looks a lot better.
Love that. So from a forward thinking standpoint for the listeners out there, what would you say the biggest suggestion or tip is to no matter where they're at, right? Especially how we talked earlier about running the company or working in it. There's nothing wrong with working in your
Sure.
company. There's a lot of people out there that do it and like it, and they're going to
Yeah.
keep it. It might be a family owned business, but there's a lot that want to scale,
Mhm.
and from that standpoint and kind of what we were talking about before, they don't even know which one. What for forward thinking and helping customers kind of at least feel good for today so tomorrow looks better, what would you say is a good tip or suggestion to start with?
I'd say one of the first things to do is to stop and think. I see founders that don't pause. They're just constantly running, 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 running. And so one of the exercises I'll take a founder to through is I'll take them away from the office, sit them down in a coffee shop and give them a legal pad and say, turn off your phone, turn off your notifications, turn off your teams, and I want you to just write ideas that you've got. Write your thoughts, write what comes out of your head. And it's sometimes really painful for them to disconnect and not have all those notifications and not have all those interruptions because they're used to
Yeah.
that lifestyle. But what I inevitably find, they will fill up 3, 4, 5 pages of a legal pad. And at the end, I'll sit down and say, okay, let's talk about what were the big things that came out of that time, and then what are 3 things you can do to improve your business? And it doesn't take any pulling for me to get that out of them. They're like, "I can do this, 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 and this. All right, well, let's go. Let's go ahead and build a plan on that." So just taking time to pause and think about their business provides an incredible amount of clarity. The best business leaders take time to think, and most founders don't stop. and they don't think.
Very interesting. They're running so fast they can't even remember their goals. I love that. I love that because, ultimately you're helping them switch their paradigm a little bit,
Mhm.
kind of rock their world in the sense
Yeah.
of calm down and breathe. I was coaching, I'm a coach, outside of work. And this is a funny story because I do see sports a lot like running a
It
business.
is,
So,
it
and I
is.
know the coaches out there will
Yeah.
agree with me there because you got all the different types of personalities that you do inside of a company. But in this regard of this example, we went 3 overtimes. Okay.
Mhm,
Now this is 12U basketball.
mhm,
And I couldn't believe we just kept going. But, I was looking at the kids and the stress on their face was out of control.
mhm.
They didn't know what was going to happen, if confetti was going to fly from the rafters. I mean, this
Yeah.
is just like on a Tuesday night during school week. But yeah, the one thing I kept saying over and over is calm down, right?
Mhm.
Gain control. But I think in our world these days, we just keep running so fast, so fast, so fast, so fast. And then we go to social media and it's even
Mm,
faster.
mhm.
No one's stopping. It
Yep.
almost sounds like, hey, why don't we go off the grid?
Yeah,
Like go camping,
yeah.
take your journal and write some thoughts down and get it out of your head. But I love that advice because you're really helping them psychologically, kind of break away from the day to day that they feel they got to be locked into and give them some freedom
Yeah.
to really help themselves.
It's called a clarity break, and really what it
Yeah,
does is it gives you clarity, and I encourage anybody that I work with, even leadership team members that are not the founder, put an hour a week on your calendar, away from your desk, away from your computer, and just sit with a legal pad, and you will be amazed at the problems that you're able to solve. The clarity that will come out of that, if you do it consistently, you will be shocked at what's in your head.
I love it. You're giving them permission to give themselves a timeout.
That's right. That's right.
Any key takeaways aside from that you can share? I really enjoyed, some of the things we talked about, and it just sounds like, you add serious value to any business owner out there that especially struggling with even just setting goals. But any takeaways you want to share with them?
Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway, we've talked about a lot today, but I think the biggest takeaway that I like to make sure founders know is there are people that can help you. And so many times founders are independent, they're blazing trails. They don't like to ask for help. But what I have seen is those founders that will stop and ask somebody for help can go farther faster. I don't call myself a coach. There's all this legal terminology about whether you're a coach
Yeah,
or not. But
right.
I will say that I have an executive coach. I
Hmm.
myself have somebody that coaches me so that I can also coach other people. And if Tiger Woods or whoever professional player you can think of, if they hire coaches, then why wouldn't you as a business owner hire somebody to coach you and help you along the way?
I like that a lot because it's, I think we always have a tendency to feel like we need to be alone,
Mhm.
and you shouldn't feel alone.
Right.
At one part in my career, I did also have a coach, and I remember that the biggest thing that I took away from my experience going through that was your operations is it should be proprietary. Really, that's what you're selling.
Yeah.
I think sales can figure it out and
Mhm.
working with marketing, which I know those 2 departments never get along, but at the same time, it really comes back to clarity. Well, this is what we do and
Yeah.
this is what we need to say, right? And get on the same page. But when it comes to working behind the iron, curtain as Wizard of Oz, there's something you need to be doing. What lever are you pushing? And that was what becomes proprietary.
Mhm.
And that's what could be your selling point as
Yeah.
a company, how much money you're making. And it almost sounds like that's really what you're doing is
Mhm.
really okay. A lot of people are making good money in their sales, but
Mhm.
when they sell it, they don't even know what they're doing. And I think as an investor, you're just seeing chaos.
Oh,
This company is gonna, fall off the planet. It sounds like I would assume a lot of the customers you're helping are super grateful for what you're doing and especially dealing with psychological challenges as a business owner. But if anybody out there listening wants to get a hold of you, What is the best way to contact you?
Yeah, you can go to my website. It's Derr Consulting, DERR consulting.com. And then you can also look me up on LinkedIn. I think I'm the only person with the name Forrest Derr out there.
Love it. So many great suggestions, listeners. Forrest, thanks so much for spending time with us today. This was packed with great takeaways, and I hope the listeners appreciate it and, reach out to you or at least take some of those tips away. Thanks again, Forrest. We'll see you on the next episode of Midway Business Podcast.
Thank you.